Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for February the 12th, 2024. As always, I'd like to recognize our friends and neighbors of the Fort Nelson First Nation, as well as the Prophet River First Nation. And we recognize their traditional territory and the treaty that we have together. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available to the public to attend virtually. It's being streamed and recorded. Are there any council additions to this? Staff?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any public online that wish to make a comment? No? Everybody's okay with the agenda the way it is? Okay. So that brings us to the Committee of the Whole report 0124 Downtown Revitalization Plan Project Prioritization for discussion. I'll turn it over to staff.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just waiting for the computer to match timing from beginning. There she goes. Okay, hi Mayor and Council. Thank you for letting us be cute to you tonight. We wanted to bring back the downtown revitalization for a bit of a priority setting and just a refresher as you go into the 2024 budget to get a little bit more information from council. So in today's meeting, I'm going to just do a really quick recap or a high level review of the downtown revitalization plan. And then we'll move into an overview of the implementation and quick win items, and Radha will go over those items as well as her report with you, and then hopefully lead into a discussion. So the purpose of the downtown revitalization plan had a couple different purposes, but to really bring in an overarching vision for the downtown area of Fort Nelson. Hopefully people can hear me based on the based on community input and priorities. So that was done through engagement. Reviewing relevant information and existing plans and background documents, to prepare a high level concept for the overall area, and then to provide recommendations and guide future potential design and construction projects in the downtown area. So through the engagement of the actual development of the strategy, we did two kind of main sections of engagement, one being in the summer, which did have 4 stakeholder workshops, a couple pop-up events throughout the community, some events, a couple walking tours, and then an online survey and web map. And then our second one in the winter, where we got community feedback on some proposed concepts. We had some open houses, and we did a presentation to the Chamber of Commerce, and we had a display set up at the rec center as well as another survey. So that all led into a vision, which led into guiding principles, which led into what the strategy calls big move recommendations. And then the vision that the community decided on. I can see it. So the vision was downtown Fort Nelson is a destination and a service center with a thriving and diverse business community and a lively, welcoming atmosphere that reflects the community's culture of kindness. Collaboration between public and private spaces contribute to a beautiful, connected downtown that is accessible for all and inclusive for both residents and visitors. Fort Nelson's unique identity, rich history, and natural surroundings are celebrated through features, amenities that designed and built to last. So in the strategy, that kind of breaks into 3 different categories: the economic vitality and strategic investment, community connectivity, and then the culture and character. Which then breaks into, as we move into our big moves or our recommendations, they break into 3 kind of broad categories as well: the non-motorized circulation, the public realm enhancements, and then vehicular circulation. And then I'm going to pass it over to Radha, who will go over the more of the recommendations and into the implementation discussion.
Thank you, Krista. So these are the project recommendations suggested within the downtown revitalization plan, which are developed based on the gaps identified within the study area and voices heard from the community. These recommendations offers a blend of projects tailored to different scales designed to enhance the downtown study area. And as such, these projects are broken down into different phases based on their timeline and expected outcomes. Quick wins and short terms are aimed to involve immediate and near future implementation with relatively quick results and tangible impacts. On the other hand, the medium term and long term will require more time, resources, and planning to execute due to their complexity of its scope. Some of the example could be infrastructure upgrades, like street or intersections upgrades. And by incorporating a mix of the quick wins, short terms, medium, and long term projects, the study area aims to achieve a balance between immediate improvements and sustained and transformative change. Overall phasing is considered based on the factors such as timing of utility upgrades, availability of fundings, council and community priorities. And in some cases, however, besides, it is important to note that this plan provides high-level conceptual considerations, which will require further planning. In some cases, stakeholder involvement and community involvement, maybe. Also, the reflection of changing circumstances will be needed to look into before undertaking major projects. So these are the quick win projects, which are aimed to involve quick and tangible impacts, and in some cases to initiate project which will form the basis for other projects. For example, the gathering space, wayfinding plan, and formalized public art program, as well as improving the business facade program, will be dependent on the project of identifying the community theme and identity. This is just additional next steps of the Quick Wins project. So by assessing the community needs, goals, and objectives of the downtown revitalization plan, considering available resources and dependencies of specific projects upon each other, we have prioritized these 3 projects as presented in the report, and we would like to open the floor for the discussion, seeking council's input in establishing project for 2024.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Council, is there any questions or comments?
Like, it looks like a very cohesive plan. I like the breakdown of it, the easy wins, the quick wins, like it seems like a very logical way to go. I like it for sure. I would support what's laid out here.
So for myself, I agree with you with respect to the 3 major projects that you've picked, because I think, really, you don't put a shovel on the ground till you figure out what the overall project will look like, and that you need to understand the branding, how all the wayfinding follows from that, because everything needs to tie together if you're gonna. So to me, that branding project should be the first priority to understand as you put here, whether it's a theme or the identity or what is it that you want this characterized downtown to look like. So that makes sense to me. The gathering space to me becomes the secondary piece to that. From understanding what the branding is, then you can start thinking, well, based on that, where's the best place to, or, you know, where can we centralize this? What might it look like? Is it a is it a building or two, or an amphitheater, or what is it? What does that look like? And is it right downtown or where? And then from there, the paths and how you put the trees in the ground, all because that would be the centralized gathering place to me. And so everything else fits and works towards what that is. And I looked at all of these. Wayfinding would be part of the paths. The arts and graphic will depend on the branding. The parklets, all of that depends on how you're flowing people to whatever that central facility is that you're looking for. And then ultimately you have to park people downtown. You know, I think you might say a quick win around parking is, you know, we can look at this other plan that we're doing with respect to just lost it, parking for
Accessibility.
Thank you, accessibility parking. You know, but that could change based on where you end up picking for your central spot. So, you know, my first impression was, yeah, let's combine those two and understand what parking looks like. But until you have a project, how do you know where you want people to park? So it has to come further down the line in my view. And that the medium and long-term sidewalk improvement, street upgrades, the plan itself sort of lays that out. But before we can do any or all of that, gotta have the money. You know, my experience with respect to downtown revitalization is with the city of Fort St. John when I was in Taylor, and just watching what they did there and the negative reaction they got from the folks in their community based on the money they were spending in a downturned economy. Not that the ideas weren't great. I think once things were in place, there are always going to be the naysayers that will never like anything that you did. The majority of people, I think, appreciate what's been done there. But while it was being done, there was just a complaint that nobody thought any of it was a good idea. And so it's and I think that was because of the downturned economy, not because the ideas weren't good, not because the vision of making your downtown core a better place to be. It was just, where do you find the money and how do you spend the money in the downturn economy like the one that we have here? So those are my thoughts. I think you're on the right track with respect to, you know, getting the branding done and figuring out what a gathering space will be, and then everything to me flows from that. So those are mine. Anybody else? So where to from here?
So there is a item for this in the 2024 budget, draft budget, so that you will see that in your budget.
Packages?
When we see there. So we'll, I think based off of this conversation, it leads us well into leaning into that branding piece as the first step and working from there with council support.
Is the thought that the branding is just for downtown or for the entire community? Right? Because it's
Yeah.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's two big things. So if it's branding it by itself, it should fit into a bigger branding, right, of the whole community, or maybe not. Maybe they can be two completely different things. So I'm just
in my perspective, and this is probably a bigger conversation that we'll still need to have. Aspects of it, I think, would roll out further than, right, if we're doing signage or things out on the community walking trail. I think that makes perfect sense, but this isn't intended to necessarily be like a new branding where we're going to come up with a new logo or anything like that for the NRM.
So then you have to take into consideration the existing branding into how you flow this event.
Yeah, so to have some of that meld, but to provide us with some guidance on what the picnic tables in the community should look like as we are replacing and upgrading, or all those things we don't really have any guidance on right now. Rada, do you want to add something else in? Did I miss? Or did I overstep?
Yeah, when we did the downtown revitalization plan, we did do a tour of the study area, and we noticed that there are some discrepancies between what materials we are using for the small park areas. Like you could see even now, some of them are stone materials, some of them are concrete, some of them are wooden. So there is not consistency. And I think it is very important that we establish that theme for the downtown at least. So, and as I mentioned earlier during the presentation, there are other projects which are very much reliant on this strategy. Mayor also echoed that fact.
Yeah, and that's where maybe some of your small wins comes. Right? If you figure out sort of even the construction materials, that now you can start doing some of these parks in little ways, little changes to some of the smaller parks, and start planning how you might be able to put pathways to all of these parks. And then now you've got some small ones. Now you can start putting out little signs here and there that fit the bigger theme without maybe doing the entire downtown bit yet. But if it all is going to come together with similar construction materials, then now you can start doing some small wins there, because those are not big budget items, right?
So getting back to the point of mayors, if it is going to be a downtown theme or the community theme, I think we could go either way. However, since this is a downtown revitalization, it could be confined to the study area, but depending on how much resources we have available and capacity, maybe we could initiate the community theme as well.
I guess the other reason I was thinking of, well, if it's really a vision for the entire community, I mean, we're starting on we're in the middle of a OCP plan. And so there might be some ideas that come out of that process as well that help with this. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize your hand was up. Go ahead.
So just on number 7, the multi-use path phased approach, including pedestrian crossing connectivity and intersection improvement. So what I heard during this whole process on this specific piece, I didn't hear consensus. So I'm assuming that before any projects are going to move forward on this piece, that there would be more community consultation. Yes?
That's right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
In fact, before we initiate any major projects, we'll come back to council. And as I mentioned during my presentation, there is potential of conducting more stakeholder engagement and community engagement for major projects.
I think the whole process, like this whole project process, was really well done. And I think the consultation was quite robust. And I heard lots of consensus throughout, but I did not hear consensus on this, that piece, including the intersection improvements.
Yeah, and that is why the plan specifically didn't propose a solution for especially one of those intersections, because there was no consensus to be had at the time.
Yeah, exactly. And there's more than one. And I hope 5 years I shan't be here and you guys can move forward with that piece, but good luck.
You're not planning on being mayor the next time?
No,
around,
I'm
All right, are there any other questions? Comments? Do you have a bit of an idea of our priorities? I guess I think they match, right? The way you guys laid it out there, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that was helpful for us, and make sure that we're all on the same page and there's no surprises coming for you guys. So thank
Perfect.
you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next report committee of the whole 0424 is efficiency options for construction projects for discussion. Mr. Barry?
Thank you, Lance. After, so we'll kind of, I guess, tag team this a little bit. Hand it over to you.
Good evening, everybody. You're familiar that we've had some challenges with respect to procuring some of our larger projects, in particular the roads and 44th Street Sanitary. So we went back and talked to some of the relevant contractors just to confirm what kind of challenges they're experiencing that maybe we can help control to provide more security and supply of that project and or consistency in their pricing or whatever the case is. So we've identified three specific options. I'll talk about each one generally, and then if you have any questions, we will figure out what the answers are. For asphalt, some of the challenges identified is mobilization is the big one. So it's a big cost to mob up every year on an annual program. And given the size of our projects, they're smaller in nature. They're not millions and millions of dollars. So going to a 2 to 3 year cycle for your asphalt program, it makes a lot of sense. You get more bang for your buck. Your mobilization costs are much smaller in comparison because your project's larger. So that's one of the things we're looking at and looking at maybe a 5-year contract with an asphalt contractor that will help give us ability to plan and contract with that so that they can get some wins, we can get some wins, and there's an efficiency across the board. Another issue we identified was gravel supply, and there's an inconsistency with pricing. Although not specific to asphalt or 44th, we did notice that in some like-for-like projects from 22 to 23, there was a 60% increase in gravel costs, 60%. So, and that's more showing just the cyclical costs that we're seeing as opposed to a huge inflation hike because it was across the board. So if we can provide some consistency in that by acquiring a 5 or 7 year supply of gravel stockpiles, that would help provide some consistency with owner supplied gravel for the larger projects. The fourth project on 44th, we've talked with the lowest competitive bidder in the 2 tenders that we've sent out and looked for the most efficient and best approach. And we're hoping to, and we'll bring this back to council at the next February 26th meeting. And the hope on that is to confirm the cost for the projects and have that project finally able to be complete because that work does need to be completed. Those are the options. Was wondering what your discussions might be.
Those are the issues. There's not very many options there.
And win a lot of money.
Yeah. Questions? Councilor Andrews?
In regarding to the asphalt, didn't we, was it last year or maybe the year before, open up a few extra years of asphalt work to incentivize a company like Peterbros to help us out? And it didn't work. So why do we think it'll work this time?
So, and I can't guarantee who that supplier is going to be. Maybe Peterbros does come to the table or others come to the table and provide a competitive bid. But we've had one consistent asphalt supplier in the time I've been here. And nobody else has been able to compete with them or submit to compete with them. So working with, the idea is to tender out a 5-year. Hopefully there's a competition for it. But it's anticipated that it will be that same contractor.
So then do we want to tender or maybe a request for interest? Because if we tender, don't we have to award?
You don't have to award.
But it ties us closer to it. Then, like, we've been down that road before. We've had to change proposals again because of the tender process.
Yeah.
I don't know. We've got burnt once on it. I would like to try it again. I just don't have the confidence.
A request for interest is an option. And then you invite the competitive players to the table.
I'll add to that. So really the intent isn't as much, I mean, if it's a bonus if we get others to submit. Right now, when we look at the 5-year plan, like we'll be coming back to council throughout this year, talking about sustainable service levels and how we provide those service levels and the additional costs. And what we're seeing is a significant increase in costs, right? That's going up. That's the inflationary piece. So there's a couple things. We're looking at how do we mitigate that cost factor? Which one way is, as Luann mentioned, is the annualized mold fees. Like currently the asphalt plant that DGS has that would need to come up this year is in Grinnell, for example, right? So we're, in discussions with a company like DGS, we're looking at, what are some other options to help mitigate those costs overall, and some of the challenges that they encounter too when they come to actually just producing asphalt, which in some cases aggregate supply, right? Because I mean, they're a business, and at the end of the day, they're not going to carry. They don't want to. They're held to performance indicators, I guess, for lack of better words, regarding how much aggregate they have left over at the end of the year, for example, right? So that means they're not producing 2 or 3 years of asphalt aggregate. They're producing 1 year of asphalt aggregate here in our region, and then would lay the asphalt down here in our region, mold, demold. So we're looking at creating some efficiencies potentially that way. And then what are some options around that on the off years to ensure that patching program, digs and whatnot, we have the ability to put some blacktop over that, right? So if the process brings a second or third contractor in, which I'm not super optimistic about it, because you're correct. I mean, we've had conversations with others, and they've said they were going to bid, and they just never. So we're dealing with what we have at our disposal, for lack of better words, in addition to what we have control over. We don't have control over who comes in. We have hope in terms of who applies, but we do have some potential control in terms of looking at some efficiencies or synergies around the cost piece, right? Because one of the things that we'll be bringing forward to council, we'll talk a little bit more during the budget time, not for this budget, but we will speak to it at this budget, is what the contributions to those reserve funds, where they need to go in the future to maintain those sustainable services, right? And we're seeing a significant increase in those, and what can we do to help mitigate some of those without having a large impact on the service delivery piece, right?
So you're looking to create a relationship with a contractor. You hope maybe some contractors will be competitive in creating that relationship to where you are only paving in the community once every 5 year.
No, I'd say 2 to 3 years, depending on what the needs
2 or
are.
3 out of 5 years.
Yeah, it just at the very least, it reduces your mold.
Right.
It also provides incentives. The larger the project, the more bang for their buck.
I get that, but
Yeah.
why would doubling or tripling the amount that you're doing make them any more interested in what about in year 1 and 2 when you don't offer anything and they just forget about you? Like, is that why you're trying to create this relationship, saying you guys will get this work in a 5-year period, and it looks like at least 2 out of the 5 years we want to pay?
Yeah.
And we'll do everything in those 2. That's how you're keeping them interested.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Otherwise they just go work in a million other places that they can work.
Well, and yeah, and the other piece is, I mean, when we asked the question, what are some options? That was one of the things they discussed too, is because we're questioning the pricing, for example, right? And if you talk asphalt aggregate, which is a special type of aggregate, as an example, they want to produce their own aggregate, because in order to stand by their product from a warranty perspective, they produce their own asphalt aggregate to make sure it meets the CIV test and quality control measures. But to do that in a small volume in 1 year, to ensure that they don't have any left over for the end of the year, there's all kinds of pieces of it, right? So they're part of the discussion is, what are some various options? It doesn't mean they wouldn't come up here in an off year, but it might mean that they don't mold a full crew up here. And like, for instance, we have had a case where we've actually brought asphalt. It was cheaper to bring asphalt out of 14 John for a couple trucks to do some patching for a patching program than it was to have the plant be up here and produce the asphalt, for example, right? So it's a balance of the two. We don't have it fleshed out yet, but it's just more around what are some of those potential options to look at securing that service and also mitigating what some of those increases are and the challenges they're having as an organization to provide the service from a cost perspective too.
Yeah, that challenge without getting some kind of a commitment from them, because potentially this could happen. And then I go to the last point that you made, which is separating these projects now. I mean, it made sense to try to gather them all together. 44th is a good example. Do all the sewer, do all the gravel road base, do the paving. Bigger project, maybe more people would be interested, maybe we get it. That never happened. Now we're back to the point where we potentially are splitting. So you get the contractor to come in and do the sewer work.
Mhm.
And they put the road back to where it was more or less good enough to drive on. Now we don't pave it for 3 years. Potentially that's what happens.
That's,
But if we're into a contract with an organization, they're contractually obligated to do something, right? So it's ensuring that contract is in place.
and,
Right?
and it was,
That's the key piece, right?
one of the discussions we had was looking at their priorities, and looking at our priorities, and that would be part of it. So if it was a small patch, there's things we can get by with.
Yes.
But all of 44th or in front of Style Right, places that are more of a priority nature, those need to be a part of the NRM's principles and priorities, and we would have to plan for it. In this
So-
case, that's
so
a
you wouldn't-
plan, that's a.
Right, but in that case, you can't always plan when you need to do, right, because 44th is at the end of its life. Right, so you can't, that's something you don't get to plan for, so it's not like, okay, we're gonna get paving 3 years from now, we're gonna try to get all of that done, so we don't want that street to be gravel for 3 years, so do we delay it? When it's telling us when it needs to be done, because it's critical infrastructure. People's toilets don't flush, they get angry.
That we would factor that into our planning process, right? Like, it's no different than how we're planning 44th right now, and the ability, like 44th Street hasn't been a surprise to us. It was been in the work for a number of years. And fortunately, we planned it far enough ahead so that we actually had some flexibility to, I don't want to jinx anything, sorry. We've had the flexibility because obviously there's that being critical infrastructure is a risk, but we've had the flexibility to be able to have these conversations because of the planning up front, right? We're not reacting to a situation this year with 44th or last year for that matter. It was something that was on a work plan for a few years. And totally understand what you're saying there. That would have to be worked into the plan. Like DGS obviously was a company we're discussing this with right now I mean, that would be, we would, if we entered into some sort of an agreement, that would be contractually agreement, right? In terms of their responses, we'll come up as many times as you need to come up. I mean, we're the customer, right? That's what they said.
They'll come up, but we'll pay for it.
But we'll pay
That's-
for it.
that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. We're saving money here, and so by planning it forward, we're trying to do economies of scale. So if they have a 5-year plan, they know more or less what we're gonna do in the next 5 years. They can come once and they can set the gravel they need for 5 years. That's the idea.
At the year of, potentially.
Well, then they're making it every year again. Right? In order for us to save money, they've got to know what we're going to do over the next 5 years so they can mow once.
Yeah.
They can get all of that gravel or that they need, knowing that it's, at some point they're gonna get paid to use it all. Or we're paying for it up front, or
We're
whatever,
paying for it up front.
whatever the case may be.
Yep.
So that we know that streets are not not getting paid. I mean, I can see a year, because if you finish your underground construction at the end of the season, then it's gravel for the next year. Yeah, I get that. But going multiple years, I think would be an issue. I mean, I like it.
So your preference is to remain with an annual program?
No, I'm just trying to understand how you're saving anything by contracting for 5 years, unless they're using economies of scale to ensure their investment is gonna pan out. Otherwise, why else would they come into and if their issue is that we just don't do big enough jobs, why would they come for the front of Style Right? 44th is big enough, but why would they come for these little priority projects that we consider priority, if, you know, and we're not saving any money on mobbing if we're getting them to come up for every little project.
We are if the plant's not here, for example, right? So I think, I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of detail that we've discussed in this, and the intent of the discussion isn't, I mean, at no time were we considering, or was part of the discussion, not having a road not paved a certain year, right? That's not the intent. What we're saying is that we know that there's some roads next year that's on the work plan as an example to pick on next year or 2 years from now, that if they weren't done that year, the road's still there. It might be unraveled, but it's not in terrible shape. It can be done in combination with other work in another year, and we would save the potential to mold for that particular year. And we also discussed the fact that there could be times of need, but what does that look like, right? Like what's the scope of work and what's required to be done? And we, like I said, we know which roads essentially need to be paved and which sewer lines need to be replaced over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. The farther out we go, the less accurate it is, of course. But within the next 5 years, in terms of short term, we have an idea what that looks like.
And estimated quantities.
And estimated quantities and everything, right? So similar to the gravel component as an example, and the challenges we're having with gravel on the open market. In that case, we're looking at doing gravel, owner supply gravel, so that we'll open up opportunities for other contractors to feel confident, not have to build it as much risk as what we're seeing.
Yeah.
That because they're very good at putting underground utilities in, but they don't have a gravel pit in town, and they try to purchase it, and they end up having to pay significant margins to get that product, for example, right? So the intent isn't to suggest that everything written in stone is multi-year or 2 or 3 year from a paving perspective. It's that based on timing, based on projects, there's an opportunity that we can schedule it that way to take advantage of an opportunity to reduce the cost, essentially. Right?
So their advantage is 5 years of certainty of projects, more or less.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, that's their advantage. I mean, at the end of the day, frankly, I mean, if there's only one player, then their advantage is to the only player too, right? So our conversations is what are some options to look at saving some costs from a scope perspective, right?
If they're a service-oriented business that wants to keep their customers happy, then certainly over the next few years is a good thing for them. Councilor Rowe.
My microphone is flashing green. There we go. Okay. I'm just curious, when you set out to engage with the contractors and find out what the barriers are, what the challenges are, is there a difference between the challenges of, say, a local company in Fort Nelson that can provide these services and, say, an outside company, or are they basically on the same playing field as far as challenges go?
They have similar challenges with respect to these specific projects. It's a large scope. So your local contractors are going to struggle in meeting this size of scope in a reasonable timeline, and asphalt's not even an option for the locals.
Yeah, that's helpful. Are there any municipalities or any organizations that do their own in-house asphalt, that invest in the equipment and the know-how and are able to do it themselves? I know that probably isn't a thing, but is it?
It is, and we actually, Fort St. John has a small scale machine that actually Josh went and saw November. Maybe you can add a little bit to that one. I didn't attend that, but
I'll list that. Add to that. It's for patching, basically.
it's not a full on asphalt plant, but it's cost prohibitive unless you're.
I'm curious as to what I too, thinking about a monopoly or a single company, it's going to be very difficult to create a deal that's attractive to them, no matter how you do it. They can build in their bidding process to tell you what it's going to cost on a 5-year basis. They can build in mob and demob for every year and make it part of their cost because that's what they want or what their expectation will be if you only have a segment as 44th Street this year and another street next year and so on, which we know what we need. And I think that the concept of owned gravel is a concept that we is definitely a benefit to us. When gravel becomes sky high, then NRM needs to use its own gravel. That's pretty straightforward. I think though that the question that Councillor Roper asked around asphalt plants, I'm curious to note, and I'll use 44th as an example. If we mobbed them in from Quesnel to do 44th, what percentage of the overall budget for that street paving would be mob and demob?
So the flat cost, they gave us a flat cost, which was no less than 200,000 roughly for each mold.
For each mob,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. So,
Okay,
but
so-
in other words, 100,000 or 5 million.
Yeah. So just a reminder then that when we had, like, there was an era where we had very few of our own services from an equipment's point of view. And we had no graders. We never owned a grader, and we had lots of graders in town, and there were lots of oil field service companies who we hired to grade until all of a sudden there weren't any graders available, and we bought graders. Now we have good graders and good loaders and so on, because we found it to be more effective to run our own equipment, and not only from an effective point of view as in access to our own, it was also the efficiencies of how to operate them within our own context. We've gained great efficiency by owning our own things. Asphalt plants are just plants. They're just another thing, and
You need a
there's,
crew.
I realize you need a crew. You need people who like doing that, but still an asphalt, nobody's going to come and work for the NRM's asphalt plant if we don't have an asphalt plant. And the thing is, I don't know, like, I understand that we have hesitancy to do that because of specialized equipment. I get that. But when you start looking at mob and demob, and mobbing is now one of the largest factors in any retail business, any contracting business. Mob is becoming one of the large ticket items in those bidding process. And if you have an asphalt plant in Fort Nelson that does not have to move, but lives here, and we use it when we need it and we don't use it when we don't need it, it's worth exploring the numbers.
So I'll add to that, just Councillor Souls, that I wouldn't argue that's not worth exploring the numbers, but I just, based on my experience, the numbers would be significantly high compared to,
We
It's-
did
it
look
is
at
fairly
them.
structured,
We
because-
looked at them, but a while.
but that said, it's, I mean, and even if it was something that was realistic to do in the near term, it wouldn't look after what we're doing in the next 2 or 3 years, right? So quite, from a realistic approach, frankly, we have a hard enough time managing our organization with existing stuff, let alone trying to start a branch off and do something new, So again, this is all great discussion, as the intent of the committee of the whole. I mean, we're early stages. So there is paving occurring this year. It's not like we're saying we're going to defer paving this year. The challenge with 44th Street, I'll be frank, it's not the actual if we can pave or not from who's available, because we have a paving contractor that's willing to pave. It's when will the project be ready for paving, because it's a fairly significant scope of work 44th is. So there's a possibility that for just construction season and scope of work to get that system done with the amount of work that needs to be done, that we might not be prepared or ready to pave in time. And a lot of factors affect that. There's weather, it's how well the project's going. Is when we dig up roads like 44th Street, we don't know sometimes what we're encountering either, because we've found some interesting treasures beneath our old original roads in the past, which weren't part of the weren't picked up the geotech or previous as-built and things like that. So in terms of the gravel piece, we've been in the business where we've crushed our own gravel in the gravel pit, and the mayor asked the question today if that's an option for us with our existing gravel pits. No. Our gravel pit in Andy Bailey doesn't have the ability to produce a clean gravel for road construction. We could look at, we're always looking at acquiring other, Muskwa's been pretty well depleted. We've got a little bit of gravel left out there. We always look at opportunities to possibly develop a gravel pit. But at the same time, that doesn't look after the short-term and near-term issue, which is seeing a significant fluctuation, as the land said, in gravel prices. So So the intent there would be to, you know, to look at acquiring a significant amount of gravel, so it could be owner supplied for any projects that we do, roadworks, sewer, water, wherever gravel's required. Because it's been creating some challenges in that respect too. For our
Councilor Henders?
Just in pertaining to the gravel, we were talking about separating items out and adding items out. 44th underground works, overground works. Is this maybe a potential light item that a contractor could profit on that we're taking away from them? That's a concern. And then inventory control of 7 years of gravel. Is that something we're going to need to scale for? Is it done on estimates? And if you talk about the smaller contractors where they're having issues acquiring gravel, now are we effectively those larger contractors that do have gravel, we're kind of shooting them in the foot because they've built themselves up to own their own gravel. Now we're giving a benefit to a smaller company. Just concerns I have talking about it.
So in terms of, is there a possibility that someone could lose profit? Absolutely. Right? But the reality is that we're buying the gravel, so they're gonna make a profit off us purchasing gravel from them. They might not, I'll say this, they probably won't make the same profit that they're quoting some of the gravel to some of the contractors, because some of those quotes and are fairly high and significant, right? And that's what happened with 44th Street in essence, is that the contractor who's very good at doing underground utilities, they're not in the business at owning gravel pits. They do underground utilities, and when they submitting their bid, or the process of going through and having those conversations, the gravel prices that they were quoted were significant. On the flip side, similarly, the smaller contractors sometimes have challenges with it too when they're doing the smaller work, because trying to access that gravel and the paying for the load is significant. From a competitive perspective, if we do a competitive process where we try to acquire 5 years worth of gravel, then the company that's successful, which would most likely be a local company, they're the ones owning the gravel pits, would obviously make a profit off that. But then at least for us, then we have a secured supply from a budgeting perspective, or sorry, from a product perspective, and also a little bit of secure understanding of what the cost would be from a budgeting perspective too, right? In regards to the inventory, we've discussed inventory. It's interesting. I'm glad you brought it up, because previously it's not something that we considered in terms of even how we manage it, right? Because back 10, 12 years ago, when I came to council and asked to put up a certain amount of inventory, we weren't even considering what asset category we get charged to. We removed it, which is today's conversation. That Trevor's not here, but I've had the conversation with Trevor, right? So inventory control is a big deal for sure. As is location where it needs to get stored, because we're actually looking at, I'm not sure if we have any news on it yet, but we're looking at potentially storing the old landfill, for example, because it's already gated, it's out of the way. Because wherever we put it, we need to be secure, right? So I mean, those are the things we're looking at. And again, these are early stages. The asphalt piece and the gravel piece, we don't have completely figured out yet. And that's the reason why I'm just bringing it to council for this discussion. It's just something that we're thinking out of the box to try to look at opportunities. Because when we look at what the potential contributions to these asset reserves categories we have in the future, it's mind boggling. It's absolutely blows your mind where we're sitting with the inflationary rates and what the cost is to do business. So we're just looking at different options to help mitigate that. 44th Street, yes, we're bringing that forward here at the next meeting to award, because we want to get that going, because even though I said we did have some flexibility, we're running out of it. We can't continue to push this one. And I know Councillor Gerwin, John, but as the mayor said, I mean, one of the things we don't want to play with is the service levels when it comes to water and sewer. If people want to turn the tap on and have the water come out and want to flush the toilet and have it go away. And the longer we delay that one, we run the risk of failure. Right? So.
Councillor Germain?
Yeah, that was gonna be my point. It's just to remind council that Scott has just done that, as 44th has been tendered 2, 3, 4 times, and we haven't been able to afford it, right? And so I just applaud everybody's effort at trying to look at things in a different way, recognizing that costs are not gonna go down. And so instead of just putting our heads in the sand and re-tendering it every year, hoping and praying that, the price is going to be less than, yeah, just wanted to applaud your thinking on try to think outside the box because, 44th has to be done pretty darn soon. Right, Counselor Roper? We want to be able to flush our toilets.
To
And-
continue. to
And
flush our toilet.
we also don't want it to be, a 9-month project either. We want a company that's gonna come in and get it done and we can move on with our lives, because it is very disruptive. So, yeah, just wanted to say that. Thanks.
And I'll just add to your point, Kyle, there's nothing that says every single project has to be owner supplied gravel. So there's, depending on, there's flexibility there.
So I think there's general consensus. I would like to see what this potential contract would look like, and I think there's consensus around the table that we should be looking at putting up our own gravel, or a certain amount of our own gravel. So we're not making a decision here. I think you guys are just looking for some general direction from us that's a way to proceed, and I think there's consensus there.
Which, we're at the points where we're gonna start tendering. And it'll be, of course, pre-budget. But we're not committed to award prior to budget. So you're gonna start to see some things come out. So gravel's gonna be one of them.
And that's specific to the gravel. Yeah, we still got lots of to figure out the asphalt piece, but the gravel piece is a little bit simpler. Some logistical stuff we had to figure out, but we're gonna scan the
we're-
horizon and see what's available out there.
We just have to check some boxes with, there's 2 ministries we're dealing on that one.
Okay. Good. Okay, thank you very much. So that brings us to, I'm missing page 2 on my agenda. Actually, I'm missing all the even pages of this. I read it on the computer. Oh, thank you very much. What's next?
New business.
Yeah, is there any new business? I don't believe there is. Of course, the day I leave my computer is the day that I need it. Is there any public questions? No? Okay, then, do we agree to move in camera for section 91K negotiations based on municipal service? It was okay? Okay, then, let's take a couple of minutes and, move in camera, and then we'll deal with that issue and have some eat. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We are finished with the in-camera portion of the committee of the whole. There's nothing for us to rise and report at this time, and so the regular committee of the whole meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.